The rain hit differently at night. Not the soft kind that made the city look romantic in movies. This was heavy, relentless rain. The kind that soaked through your clothes in 30 seconds and turned every pothole into a small lake. The kind that made the streets empty fast. Becky pulled the hood of her red raincoat tighter and shifted the plastic bag to her other hand. Milk. Bread. A small bag of chips her mother didn't know about. Simple errand. 3 blocks home. She had walked this route 100 times. Past the Chinese laundromat with the broken sign. Past the barbershop with the old men who always played dominoes outside but never did when it rained. Past the narrow alley between the apartment buildings where the street light had been broken for 2 weeks and nobody had fixed it yet. 3 blocks. She knew every crack in the sidewalk, but she had never noticed how loud her own footsteps were until tonight. Because tonight there were other footsteps behind them. Slow. Heavy. Measured. Becky told herself it was nothing. The city was full of people walking home in the rain. That was normal. That was just how cities worked. But something in the back of her mind, that small quiet voice her mother always told her to listen to, was already paying attention. She walked a little faster. The footsteps behind her stayed exactly the same distance away. Not closer. Not farther. Just there. Patient. Like whoever it was had nowhere else to be and all the time in the world to get there. Becky glanced over her shoulder. The man was tall. Not regular tall. The kind of tall that made you recalibrate how big a person could actually be. Broad shoulders. Black coat hanging from them like curtains on a window. Rain running down his slicked-back dark hair and along the sharp angles of a face that looked like it had been cut from something hard. His collar was open despite the cold, and along his neck crawled the dark lines of a tattoo that disappeared beneath his shirt. He wasn't looking at her. But he wasn't not looking at her either. Becky faced forward again. Her grip on the grocery bag tightened. She turned left at the next corner, a turn she didn't actually need to make. A test her mother had taught her. If you think someone is following you, change direction. See what they do. She counted to 5 and looked back. He had turned left too. Still the same distance. Still that same unhurried pace. The broken streetlight above the alley flickered once and died completely. Becky's hand moved into her coat pocket and wrapped around the small flip phone inside. Her mother's voice was already in her head. Bad people count on kids being scared into silence. Becky flipped the phone open. Her fingers were trembling slightly, but her voice came out steadier than she expected. 911. What's your emergency? Becky lowered her chin toward the phone like she was telling it a secret the rain wasn't supposed to hear. There's a man following me. A brief pause on the line. Then the operator's voice. Calm, practiced, the voice of someone who had heard 1,000 scared people and knew exactly how to slow their heartbeat down. Okay, sweetheart. Where are you right now? Becky squinted up at the street sign through the rain. Maple and 3rd. And the man, is he still behind you? She turned her head slightly. Yes. He was still there. Standing beneath the flickering yellow glow of a street lamp on the opposite side of the road now, rain sliding down his face. He had crossed the street at some point without her noticing. He wasn't advancing. He wasn't retreating. He was just standing there in the downpour with his hands in his coat pockets like he was waiting for a bus that would never come. Yes, Becky whispered. He's just standing there, staring. What does he look like? Becky swallowed hard. Really big. All black clothes. He has a tattoo on his neck. She paused. He looks like a villain. Across the street, the man tilted his head to one side. Not in a threatening way. More like something she said had slightly surprised him. Because the rain carried sound farther than Becky realized. You're doing the right thing, the operator said firmly. Stay exactly where you are. Don't run. Officers are already on their way to you. Becky exhaled slowly. Police. Real adults. People with authority and handcuffs and the ability to make problems disappear legally. She straightened her spine slightly and looked across the street again. And something unexpected happened. The man noticed. He watched her stand up straighter with the phone pressed to her ear, watched her chin lift against the rain, watched a 9-year-old girl in a soaking red raincoat decide she wasn't going to be afraid of him. And for the first time that night, something shifted in his expression. Not annoyance. Not threat. Something that looked almost like quiet respect. In the distance, a siren began to rise above the sound of the rain. Becky heard it and her shoulders dropped half an inch with relief. She whispered into the phone, "They are coming." Across the street, Kwon Shamok heard the sirens too. He looked at the small girl standing alone in the rain. And then he did something that would have shocked anyone who knew his name. He stayed exactly where he was. The police car came around the corner fast, red and blue lights slashing through the rain and across the buildings like something out of a movie. It rolled to a stop beside Becky with a sound of wet tires on asphalt, and both doors opened at the same time. 2 officers stepped out. The older one looked down at Becky first. Mid-50s. Heavy build. The kind of face that had seen enough of the city to stop being surprised by most of it. You the one who called? Yes, sir. You all right? Becky pointed across the street without hesitation. Here's the one. Both officers turned at the same time. For a full 3 seconds, neither of them spoke. Because standing beneath the street lamp across the road, rain-soaked, motionless, completely unbothered by any of it, was a man they both recognized immediately. The younger officer inhaled slowly through his nose. He was newer to the force. Maybe 2 years in. But even he knew that face. Everyone who wore a badge in this city knew that face. You have got to be kidding me, he said under his breath. The older officer didn't move. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, because the man standing across that wet street wasn't just a suspect. He was Kwon Shamok, the name that surfaced in case files and then disappeared before anything reached a courtroom. The man whose shadow stretched across half the city's underground economy. Organized crime investigators had been building cases against him for 6 years. 6 years. And every single time, witnesses recanted, evidence went cold, and the case file ended up in a drawer. He wasn't just dangerous. He was the kind of dangerous that made other dangerous people nervous. And right now he was standing in the rain being reported by a 9-year-old for following her home from the corner store. The younger officer leaned toward his partner. That's him, right? Yeah. What do we do? The older officer straightened his jacket. Our job. He stepped forward and raised his voice across the street. Mr. Kwon. The name landed in the air between them like a stone dropped into still water. Becky blinked. Her eyes moved between the officers and the man across the road. You know him? Neither officer answered her. Because across the street, Kwon Shamok had already stepped off the curb. He crossed toward them slowly. No rushing. No hesitation. Every step deliberate, like a man who had long ago stopped feeling the need to hurry for anyone. The younger officer's hand drifted toward his radio out of pure instinct. Not aggression. Just the body's automatic response to something it recognized as significant. Kwon stopped several feet from Becky. Close enough to speak. Far enough that she wouldn't feel crowded. His dark eyes dropped to meet hers. Then he said 4 words in a deep, unhurried voice. She did the right thing. The older officer cleared his throat. Mr. Kwon. This young lady called because she believed you were following her. I was. Becky's eyes went wide. The younger officer frowned. You want to explain that? Kwon Shamok said nothing for a moment. His gaze moved slowly down the street behind Becky, past her, past the police car, scanning the length of the block the way a man scans a room when he enters it. Checking every corner, every shadow, every parked car. Only when he was satisfied did he speak. 10 minutes before she called you, he said quietly. 2 men were parked in a van 2 blocks from here. Gray. No plates on the rear. Parked in the alley mouth near 5th. The officers went still. They were talking about a child walking home from the store. Red raincoat. Small. Alone. He paused. They weren't whispering. The rain drummed steadily against the pavement as those words settled. They were planning. The younger officer already had his radio up. Dispatch, possible suspicious vehicle near 5th and Maple, gray van, no rear plates. Possible child abduction attempt. Request patrol units. Static. Then dispatch acknowledging. Meanwhile, Becky stared up at Kwon Shamok with an expression that had completely shifted from what it was 10 minutes ago. You heard them talking about me, she said slowly. Yes. So you followed me? Yes. She crossed her arms. Considered this for a moment with the serious expression of someone doing complicated math in their head. That's still weird, she said. For the first time, the corner of Kwon Shamok's mouth moved. Just slightly. A faint involuntary twitch that on any other face might have become a smile. I agree, he said. The older officer rubbed his jaw. So instead of calling us, you decided to personally shadow a child through 4 city blocks in the dark. Kwon's eyes returned to Becky. She was already walking. I chose the fastest method to keep her safe. A silence followed that none of them quite knew how to fill. Until Becky tilted her head and said very plainly, "So you weren't being a pervert." One of the officers made a sound that was definitely not a laugh and definitely was. Kwon Shamok shook his head once. "No." Becky studied his face carefully for a long moment. Then she said, "Okay, but you still look like one." And for the first time that night, in the rain, on an empty street, surrounded by police lights, Kwon Shamok laughed. Quietly, almost against his will. The rain softened. The police lights kept spinning their slow red and blue circles across the buildings, and somewhere down the block a patrol unit was already moving toward Fifth Avenue. But the center of the street had grown strangely calm, like the eye of something that had been a storm a few minutes ago. Becky was still studying him. Now that the fear had drained out of her, she was looking at him the way kids look at things they genuinely cannot categorize. Not as a threat. Not yet as safe. Just as something that didn't fit any box she already had. The dragon tattoo along his neck. The expensive coat soaked heavy with rain. The way both police officers, grown men with guns and badges, still positioned themselves carefully when they spoke to him. Not aggressive. Just careful. The way you were careful around something with gravity. Then Kwon Shamok did something that stopped everyone. He bent his knees. Slowly, without announcement, the most feared man in the city lowered himself into a crouch until his eyes were level with a 9-year-old girl's. The younger officer actually took a small step forward before stopping himself. Because men like Kwon Shamok did not kneel. That was simply a fact of the city. Power moved upward, not down. And yet here he was, rain dripping from his hair onto the pavement, making himself the same height as a child in a red raincoat. He extended one hand slightly, palm open, facing up, not reaching for her, just resting there in the air between them like a question with no pressure attached to it. Becky looked at his hand, then at his face. "You did the right thing," he said. "For calling the police on you?" "Yes." She frowned. "You're not mad?" "No." "You're not gonna yell at me or anything?" "No." She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "I really thought you were following me." "I was." "But you were protecting me." "Yes." "That's confusing." "Yes," he agreed. "It is." The rain tapped softly in the puddles between them. Then he said something quieter. "Your mother told you to call for help if something felt wrong." Becky nodded. "She told me bad people count on kids staying silent." "She is right." Becky looked at him for a long moment. "Are you a bad person?" The question sat in the air between them, honest and undefended the way only a child's questions could be. Kwon Shamok didn't answer immediately. He gave the smallest, most careful shake of his head. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "people are both." Becky stared at him trying to understand that. But something about the way he said it, not as an excuse, not as a boast, just as a plain and tired truth, made it feel more honest than most things adults had ever told her. "You were brave tonight," he said, "even when you believed I was dangerous." Becky was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're the scariest person I've ever met." His expression didn't change. "But you're also the nicest one tonight." The mist had almost replaced the rain entirely. Thin and quiet, drifting through the amber glow of the streetlights and making the whole block look like something from a dream you couldn't quite hold onto after waking. The police activity had shifted down the street. Backup was coming. The radio chatter had grown steady. Becky was about to ask Kwon Shamok how long he had been in the city when she heard the engine. Low. Slow. Too quiet for the empty street. All four of them heard it at the same moment. Headlights appeared at the far end of the block, pale and searching, moving at the pace of something that was looking rather than going somewhere. A gray van rolled around the corner and crept toward the intersection. Dark windows. No rear plate. The older officer's voice dropped immediately. "That's it." The van slowed as it reached the intersection. Its headlights swept across the street like two dull eyes scanning for something specific. For just a moment it seemed like it might keep moving. Then the engine idled. The van stopped, and the passenger door slid open. Two men stepped out into the rain. Both of them moved with the practiced casual urgency of people who had done this before, not running, not obvious, just moving with direction and purpose through the wet street. Their eyes went immediately to the red raincoat. They hadn't noticed the police car yet. The younger officer's hand was already on his radio. "Dispatch, suspects on scene." But Kwon Shamok was already moving. One fluid step forward and he placed his full frame directly between Becky and the two men. No announcement. No hesitation. His shoulders squared and his spine straightened to full height, and suddenly Becky completely disappeared behind a wall of black. The two men stopped walking. They had spotted the police car now. But more than the police car, they had spotted him. And the confidence that had been carrying them across the street evaporated so completely and so fast that it was almost physical, like watching air leave a room. Because there were people in this city you risked confronting. And there were people in this city you simply did not. Kwon Shamok stood in the rain without speaking, without moving, without any expression on his face at all, and that was somehow worse than anything else he could have done. Becky peeked around his arm, eyes enormous. "You said you scared them before," she whispered. "Yes," he said. He didn't look back at her. His eyes stayed locked on the two men across the street with the focused stillness of something that didn't need to move to be dangerous. The standoff lasted 4 seconds. Then the older officer stepped forward. "Don't move. Hands where I can see them." The street exploded. One man bolted for the van. The other spun and ran for the alley, shoes hammering the wet pavement as he disappeared into the dark gap between the apartment buildings. "Stop." The younger officer was already moving, radio bouncing at his hip as he sprinted after the man on foot. The older officer had his weapon drawn. "Dispatch. Suspects fleeing. One on foot in the alley, one in a gray van heading east on Maple. Need units now." The van's engine roared. Tires spun against the wet asphalt before catching, and the vehicle lurched forward, directly toward Kwon Shamok. "Move," the older officer shouted. Kwon Shamok did not move. He stood in the headlights with his hands at his sides and his feet planted and watched the van accelerate toward him with the absolute calm of a man who had calculated something the rest of them hadn't yet. Becky's hands flew to her mouth. The headlights rushed at him. 20 feet. 15. 10. The van swerved. Violently. At the last possible second, the driver jerked the wheel hard and the van fishtailed across the wet road, tires screaming, spraying a wave of rainwater across the street before straightening and disappearing around the corner. The older officer stood with his weapon still raised, staring at the empty road where the van had been. "He didn't even flinch," he said quietly. "To no one in particular." From the alley came the sound of a brief scuffle and then the younger officer's voice. "Got one." He emerged from the darkness pushing a man ahead of him, soaked, defeated, struggling weakly in a way that had already given up. The suspect's eyes moved around the street rapidly and then settled on Kwon Shamok and stayed there. Not with anger. With fear. Pure, specific, informed fear. "Who sent you?" the older officer demanded as the cuffs went on. The man shook his head, eyes still fixed on the tall figure near the police car. "Not him," he said quickly. We didn't know it was him." "What are you talking about?" "Doesn't matter." The man shook his head again. "It doesn't matter now." Behind them, Becky stepped out slowly from where she had pressed herself against the police car. Her sneakers made small quiet splashes on the wet pavement. She looked up at Kwon Shamok. "You didn't move," she said. "No. You weren't scared." He glanced down at her. The hard thing that had been in his face during the confrontation, that cold, locked-down focus, softened slightly. "No," he said. Becky was quiet for a moment. "Well," she said, "I was." The corner of his mouth lifted. "I know," he said. The street breathed again. Backup units had arrived and peeled off after the van. The arrested suspect was in the back of the patrol car. Radios crackled with updates. The machinery of consequence was in motion and all of it was moving away from this small wet corner of the city. What remained was the mist, the spinning lights, and two figures standing beside a street lamp that had somehow become the center of everything tonight. Becky looked up at him differently now. Before, she had seen the tattoo first. The size. The black coat. The shadow of a man that every instinct told her to fear. Now she was seeing the lines of tiredness around his eyes. The way his coat hung heavy with rain he had chosen to stand in. The way he always, even now, even casually, positioned himself slightly between her and the open street without appearing to think about it. Like a wall that had simply decided it belonged there. "You really followed me the whole time just to keep me safe?" she asked. "Yes." She kicked softly at a puddle. "You could have just told me." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a moment. His eyes moved briefly toward the alley. "If I had spoken to you, the men watching would have known you were being protected. They might have moved sooner. Or differently." Becky absorbed this. Assembled it. Nodded slowly the way people nod when the last piece of something slides into place. So staying scary kept me safer.
He looked at her.
Yes.
She thought about that for a long moment.
That's actually really smart, she said. Something passed through his expression that wasn't quite a smile but was related to one.
I still thought you were a pervert though, she added.
The older officer turned away to look at something extremely interesting on the far side of the street.
Kwon Shamok simply nodded.
That was a reasonable conclusion.
Becky studied his face one more time. Carefully.
The way she studied her homework when she wanted to make sure she had understood it correctly. Then she said very quietly, "Thank you."
The words were small. Simple.
The kind of thing people said 100 times a day for coffee orders and held doors.
But they landed differently here. Because people did not thank Kwon Shamok. They feared him or they needed him or they avoided him. He was not a person that the city's civilians looked in the eyes and thanked.
The whole architecture of his life had been built in the space beyond gratitude.
And yet,
a 9-year-old girl in a soaking red raincoat was standing in front of him in the rain, looking at him like he was simply someone who had done something kind.
He nodded once. "You're welcome," he said. The rain came back. Soft this time. Gentle.
The kind of rain that felt like the city exhaling after holding its breath too long. It fell through the amber glow of the streetlights and made the whole block shimmer quietly, like something being washed clean. Most of the officers had moved on. The older one remained, jacket darkening at the shoulders from the drizzle.
Becky looked down the street.
She could see the corner of her building from here. The light above the front door that her mother always left on when she was out.
One more block. She looked back up at Kwon Shamok. "You're not gonna follow me again, are you?" she asked.
He considered the question with the full seriousness it apparently deserved. "Tonight," he said finally, "I will."
Becky stared at him.
"That's the same thing you were doing before."
"Yes. But you said that wasn't following."
"I said it was protecting."
She opened her mouth, closed it,
looked at the older officer for support and received nothing useful.
Turned back.
"Adults," she said, with the exhausted authority of someone who had been dealing with them for 9 years, "are so confusing."
The officer stepped forward. "We'll have patrol units on the block all night.
You're safe to walk home." Kwon Shamok spoke quietly beside him. "I will walk her." The officer looked at him for a moment, then nodded. Because if there was one person on that street capable of making absolutely certain that nothing happened to this child in the next 60 seconds, it was the man standing next to him.
Becky started walking.
Her red coat swayed as she stepped around the puddles, the grocery bag still in her hand, the flip phone back in her pocket.
She passed the barbershop, past the laundromat.
The familiar cracks in the pavement appeared one by one beneath her feet. Then she heard the footsteps behind her.
Slow, steady, the same distance they had always been. She stopped and turned around. He stopped too.
"You're doing it again," she said. "Yes. You said. I said you would not walk home alone tonight."
His voice was even, patient, unmovable.
"I did not say I would stop walking." Becky looked at him standing in the mist and the amber light with rain on his shoulders and a dragon tattoo on his neck and the face of a man the whole city was afraid of. Then slowly, the kind of slowly that meant she had thought about it and made a decision, she smiled.
"Okay," she said. She turned back around and kept walking.
And several steps behind her, through the soft rain and the quiet street and the warm glow of a door light that had been left on for her,
the most feared man in the city followed a little girl home.
Making sure she made it safely. Every step of the way.